The boardwalk was alive with laughter and music when a girl's trembling hands set down her easel. Her sign was small, almost invisible. Art for Chemo. Most people walked past. Then the engines came. 1,000 Harleys thundered into town, and silence fell like a storm. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. The ocean air carried the scent of salt and fried dough, mingling with the chatter of families and street performers along the worn wooden planks of Clearwater Boardwalk. Beneath a striped umbrella sat 16-year-old Emily Lawson, her pale frame bundled in a thrifted hoodie despite the warm July sun. At her feet, a cardboard sign leaned against her folding chair. Original art, saving for Chemo. Each word written in shaky marker. Passers-by glanced, some curious, most avoiding eye contact. Emily adjusted the edge of her canvas, a seascape painted in soft blues and tangerine hues. The paintbrush still smudged her fingers, but her spirit had poured into the piece. She wasn't just painting waves, she was painting survival. A few children tugged at their parents' arms to look closer, but the adults hurried on. Emily smiled faintly anyway. Every glance felt like hope. Yet inside, a quiet fear pressed against her chest. She had only weeks to raise enough money, and hope she knew couldn't pay hospital bills. Her mother, Caroline, watched from a bench nearby, pretending to read a paperback. The truth was she couldn't bear to look at her daughter without tears. Caroline's once vibrant red hair now hung dull, the stress of unpaid bills etching lines into her face. Emily caught her staring and forced a grin. "I'll sell one today," she whispered, more to herself than to her mom. The boardwalk felt endless. Jugglers tossing fire, buskers strumming guitars, tourists with ice cream cones. Yet her little stand seemed invisible. A group of college students paused, whispered, then walked off laughing. Emily's cheeks burned, but she kept her chin lifted. She remembered the doctor's words, delivered under sterile white lights. 2 more rounds of treatment are essential. Without them, the cancer may return aggressively. The number he had written on the chart haunted her. $30,000. Emily had counted her savings last night. $86.14. She picked up a brush and added another streak of gold to her sunset painting. If people wouldn't see her, maybe her art would speak louder. The hours dragged. A seagull perched on the railing beside her, cocking its head like it too wondered why no one was stopping. Emily brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, wincing at the sight of her thinning scalp under the hood. A businessman slowed, eyes flicking to her sign. For a heartbeat, hope bloomed. Then he shook his head, muttered "kids," and walked on, phone pressed to his ear. Emily's hand trembled. She wanted to scream that this wasn't about charity. It was about survival. But she swallowed it down. Caroline rose, kneeling beside her. "Maybe we should head home, honey." Emily shook her head fiercely. "No, not yet." A young boy tugged his mother closer to the paintings. "Mom, look!" The woman hesitated, then smiled apologetically. "Sorry, sweetheart, not today." Emily's chest ached, but she forced a polite nod. As the sun dipped lower, the glow of carnival lights flickered on. The day had slipped through her fingers again, leaving only unsold canvases and the bitter taste of failure. That night, Emily lay awake listening to the ocean pounding the shore. Her sketchpad balanced on her knees, pencil tracing shapes in the dark. Her body was tired, her bones heavy from the last chemo, but her mind raced. She thought of her father, long gone since the divorce, who had once told her, "Artists see the world differently. You'll paint things no one else dares to." She missed him terribly, especially now, when every canvas felt like a desperate letter to the world. "Please see me. Please help me live." Caroline tiptoed in, carrying a cup of chamomile tea. She set it down gently. "I don't have to keep pushing yourself, sweetheart." Emily shook her head. "If I stop, Mom, it all stops." Caroline sat at the edge of the bed, brushing her daughter's frail hand. Neither spoke of the overdue hospital bills stacked on the counter. Neither spoke of the phone calls from collectors. In the silence, the pencil scraped softly across paper, Emily sketching the horizon. A horizon she was determined to reach. The next day, Emily tried again. She set up earlier this time, before the tourists filled the boardwalk. The salty breeze tugged at her hoodie as she lined up her paintings. Oceans, skies, flowers that refused to wilt. By mid-morning, only a handful of people had stopped. Then, unexpectedly, a man in a leather vest leaned on the rail beside her. His arms were tattooed, his beard streaked with gray. He studied a canvas without speaking. Emily's stomach knotted. He looked rough, intimidating. Finally, he grunted. "This one's good." She swallowed. $80. He pulled a crumpled bill from his pocket, slapped it on the table, and walked off with the painting tucked under his arm. Emily blinked in shock. Her first sale in days. Caroline hurried over, whispering, "See? It's working." Emily clutched the cash, heart racing. Maybe the world wasn't blind to her after all. She didn't know that man's name. Didn't know he was part of something much bigger. For now, all she knew was that hope had just flickered alive again. By evening, Emily had sold 3 more. Word seemed to trickle, not flood, but enough to keep her hands moving, her spirit holding on. She painted late into the night, fingers stained in cobalt and crimson, each brushstroke a prayer. But the exhaustion crept deeper. Her chest tightened with coughs, her body weakened. Caroline hovered, offering water, trying to mask her worry. Emily whispered, "If I can just sell enough, Mom, just enough to finish treatment." Caroline pressed her lips to her daughter's temple. She wanted to believe, wanted to hold on to the same hope. The following morning, a stranger approached her booth, a local journalist. She snapped photos, asked questions. Emily answered shyly, not expecting much. Yet by afternoon, the article appeared online. "Teen battles cancer, sells art to survive." The story spread quietly at first, then faster. Strangers began leaving notes, small donations tucked under canvases. Emily's cheeks flushed each time someone said, "You're brave." Brave, she thought, didn't feel right. She wasn't brave. She was just desperate not to disappear. The article reached farther than anyone imagined. A teacher from across the county drove in, buying 2 paintings for her classroom. A cafe owner hung one on his wall. Each sale brought relief, but also fear. The gap between what she needed and what she had was still enormous. Emily sat quietly as the boardwalk bustled, lost in thought. Then she noticed a small group of bikers down the street. Leather vests, patches, boots heavy on the planks. People edged aside nervously. Emily shrank back. One of them, the same grey-bearded man who'd bought her painting days before, pointed toward her stand. Her pulse quickened. The bikers walked closer, boots echoing against the wood. For a moment she feared they might mock her, like others had. Instead they stopped. One bent low, peering at a canvas of fiery tulips. "She painted this?" he asked Caroline, his voice surprisingly soft. When Caroline nodded, he laid down a bill and walked away. Another followed. And another. Something was stirring, though Emily didn't yet understand its size. Caroline whispered later that night, "Do you know who they were?" Emily shook her head. "They're Hell's Angels, Em. A motorcycle club. People say all sorts of things about them." Emily's brows furrowed. She had only seen them in headlines, never in person. Rough, feared, sometimes vilified. Yet the man with the grey beard had spoken with gentleness, his eyes crinkling as if he truly saw her. The image stuck with her. She kept painting, strokes sharper now, more alive. She thought of steel horses roaring down highways, of leather jackets glinting under sun. She painted not fear but strength, and quietly, somewhere far from that little town, word kept traveling. One painting at a boardwalk had sparked whispers in bars, in biker gatherings across state lines. A girl was fighting cancer with paintbrushes, refusing to bow down, and she needed help. Emily didn't know yet that those whispers were becoming a rallying cry. echoing louder with every mile. The following weekend, Emily set up as usual. The morning was slow, the heat already oppressive. Sweat dampened her hood, her hands shaking as she adjusted canvases. A couple bought a small seaside sketch. Emily smiled faintly, but her body ached with fatigue. Suddenly, the ground beneath the boardwalk seemed to tremble. A low rolling thunder echoed in the distance. Conversations faltered. Tourists turned their heads. The hum grew louder, closer, a chorus of engines, deep and unrelenting. Emily's breath caught. Over the horizon, a line of motorcycles appeared, chrome flashing in the sun. Dozens, then hundreds. The boardwalk grew still, the air heavy with anticipation. People stepped back as the procession roared nearer, leather vests rippling in the wind. At the front, the gray-bearded man steered his Harley with calm authority. Emily gripped the edge of her table, heart pounding. This couldn't be real. Yet it was. The Hells Angels weren't just passing through. They were coming for her. The first bikes pulled up, engines rumbling like thunder trapped inside steel. One by one, they parked along the curb, the line stretching farther than Emily's eyes could follow. Tourists raised phones, snapping photos, filming. Children clutched their parents' hands, torn between awe and fear. Emily sat frozen, the brush slipping from her grasp. The gray-bearded biker dismounted, helmet tucked under his arm. His eyes met hers, steady and warm. Then he smiled. Thought you might need a little company. Behind him, the line of bikers stretched on. Men and women, young and old, a sea of leather and chrome. Caroline rushed to Emily's side, breathless. My God, she whispered. The air vibrated with the collective power of their arrival. And then, almost ceremoniously, the bikers approached Emily's stand. One by one, they laid money on the table, buying paintings, sketches, even blank canvases. Emily's world blurred, tears spilling as her little art booth transformed into the center of something extraordinary. The crowd swelled, people pressing in to witness the spectacle. Local news cameras arrived, shoving microphones through the sea of leather. Emily's paintings vanished one after another, clutched against tattooed chests, strapped to bike racks. One biker, a woman with braided hair tucked under a red bandana, knelt beside Emily. These colors, she murmured, holding a canvas of wild sunflowers. They're alive. Just like you. She pressed a wad of bills into Emily's trembling hand. Emily tried to protest, but her voice cracked. The biker squeezed her shoulder. Let us fight with you. Caroline sobbed openly now, overwhelmed. 1,000 engines had silenced the boardwalk, and yet Emily felt only the heartbeat of kindness, thundering through it all. For the first time since her diagnosis, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt surrounded by power, by loyalty, by an army she never asked for, but one that had chosen her. As the sun dipped, golden light spilled across the boardwalk, catching chrome and leather in a surreal glow. Emily sat clutching the growing pile of envelopes and cash, her fingers trembling too much to count. Caroline finally whispered, Emily, this is enough. More than enough. Emily's chest tightened. For weeks she had painted against the clock, fearing time would run out. And now in a single day her future had been rewritten. Reporters swarmed, asking questions she couldn't process. All she could do was look at the sea of bikers, their patches gleaming in the dying light. The gray-bearded man lifted his chin, eyes steady on hers. We ride for family, he said simply. And your family now. Emily's throat closed. She tried to speak, but tears won. Around her, strangers clapped, cheered, cried. The roar of 1,000 engines ignited again, shaking the night. And in that thunder, Emily felt something she hadn't dared to feel for months. Certainty she would survive. The news spread like wildfire. By morning, Emily's face was everywhere. National headlines, viral videos, hashtags trending. AngelsForEmily. Clips of the moment the Hells Angels lined the boardwalk drew millions of views. Donations flooded online. Letters poured into her tiny town. Teachers from Boston, retirees from Texas, artists from London, all writing to say her fight gave them hope. Emily scrolled through the comments, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "You're not alone. Keep painting. My daughter is fighting too. Thank you for showing us strength." Caroline watched, overwhelmed. Their small apartment, once heavy with unpaid bills, now overflowed with boxes of supplies, letters, gifts. For the first time, Emily's sketchpad felt light in her hands, not desperate. She could draw without fear pressing her chest. Yet she knew the truest miracle wasn't the money. It was the proof that kindness still lived, even in the most unexpected places, roaring down highways on two wheels. Weeks later, Emily returned to the hospital. The sterile smell still clung to the halls, but this time she didn't feel crushed. Caroline walked beside her, paperwork tucked under her arm, bills finally paid in full. The nurse smiled knowingly as they checked in. "We've all seen the news, sweetheart. You've got an entire army behind you." Emily smiled weakly, sliding into the treatment chair. The IV prick still stung. The nausea still loomed, but her heart beat steadier. Outside those walls, thousands of strangers had lifted her up, refused to let her fall. She thought of the bikers' faces, the way their voices rumbled like thunder, yet their eyes softened when they spoke to her. She thought of the grey-bearded man's words, "Your family now." Emily closed her eyes as the machine beeped. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had been given the greatest medicine of all, hope, wrapped in the roar of steel horses. Recovery was brutal. There were nights Emily curled on her side, clutching her sketchpad, tears soaking the paper. Caroline sat at her bedside, stroking her hair, whispering that storms always pass. Slowly, Emily's body began to heal. The days grew longer, brighter. Her hair fuzzed back, her cheeks flushed with color. She returned to the boardwalk one spring morning, carrying new canvases. The wooden planks groaned under her steps, but her heart felt light. Locals waved, some stopping to hug her. A cafe owner displayed her latest piece proudly in the window. Emily set up her stand, this time not with desperation but gratitude. She painted the horizon again, the same one she had sketched in the dark months before. Only now it glowed with dawn instead of dusk. When children stopped, she knelt to show them the brushstrokes. When strangers admired her work, she smiled without fear. Emily had survived, and her art, once her lifeline, was now her gift back to the world. One afternoon, a rumble echoed faintly in the distance. Emily froze, heart skipping. Then she laughed, a sound rich and alive, as a handful of motorcycles rolled up the street. Not 1,000 this time, but enough to turn heads. The grey-bearded man dismounted once again, helmet tucked under his arm. He walked toward her booth, grin splitting his weathered face. "Miss us?" Emily wiped her hands on her apron, tears already blurring her sight. "Always." He glanced at her new painting, a massive canvas of steel horses riding beneath a blazing sky. He chuckled. "Looks like family to me." Around them, people stopped, whispering, smiling. Emily handed him the painting, shaking her head when he reached for his wallet. "No charge," she whispered. "This one's yours." His eyes softened. He nodded, accepting it like a sacred gift. The engines roared again, but this time Emily didn't feel small. She felt infinite. Months passed. Emily's story became a documentary, screened in schools, shared across continents. She spoke at fundraisers, urging people to support families drowning in medical bills. She didn't call herself brave, only grateful. Yet everywhere she went, people called her light. Caroline watched with quiet pride, often whispering thanks into the night air. Emily still returned to the boardwalk, though not to beg. She painted because it was who she was. Tourists stopped asking, "Are you the girl?" She only smiled. The truth was, she wasn't that girl anymore. She wasn't just the girl selling art to save her life. She was a survivor, a dreamer, an artist who had once been carried by thunder, and she never forgot. Every time engines roared distantly on the highway, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Family." One summer evening, Emily hosted her first gallery show in New York City. The room buzzed with collectors, journalists, and admirers. On the wall hung canvases bursting with color, seascapes, wildflowers, the steel horse painting replicated in smaller versions. At the center was her masterpiece, the 1000, a sweeping mural of bikes lining a boardwalk, engines glowing like constellations. Guests murmured in awe. Emily, now stronger, hair cropped stylishly short, greeted each one with a quiet humility. When asked about her inspiration, she simply said, "I paint the moments that saved me." Caroline stood in the corner, hands clasped, tears streaming. Emily's eyes scanned the crowd, half expecting to see familiar leather vests. And though none were there, she knew they didn't need to be. Their mark was permanent, on her art, on her heart, on her future. After the show, Emily returned home, slipping quietly onto the boardwalk once again. The night air was warm, the stars endless. She set up her easel, sketch pad balanced on her lap. She drew not from desperation, but from joy. Couples strolled, children laughed, street musicians played. Life was ordinary again, beautifully ordinary. Caroline sat nearby, sipping coffee, watching her daughter without fear for the first time in years. Emily looked up at the horizon, the same horizon she had drawn through tears, now painted with light. She whispered softly, "I made it." A lone motorcycle hummed past in the distance. She smiled, pencil moving again. Not every miracle came with noise. Some came with quiet endurance, with strokes of a brush, with the roar of unseen angels still guarding her from afar. Years later, Emily would tell her story to younger artists, to patients in sterile hospital rooms, to anyone who felt small and unseen. She always began with the same words. "I was just a girl with paint on my hands and fear in my heart. But then they came." She never exaggerated, never needed to. The truth itself was enough, that when hope seemed lost, 1,000 engines carried it back to her. She always ended her story the same way, too. With a quiet smile, she would say, "Art saved me, but so did family." And sometimes family finds you in the unlikeliest thunder. And then she would pause, letting silence carry the weight. Somewhere faintly a rumble would echo from the highway. Emily would close her eyes, heart swelling with gratitude, knowing that she was never truly alone. Emily's brushes once painted survival. Now they paint a future brighter than she dreamed. From fear to thunder, from silence to 1,000 engines, her story proves kindness rides farther than we know. If this story touched you, like, subscribe, and tap the bell. More true stories await.